congressional elections in the state of Minnesota. You know, the other thing that I think ranked choice voting would help with is it would absolutely cause more members to behave the way that you have to behave in districts like mine. You cannot just ignore a section of your electorate. You can't just talk to suburban voters. You've got to spend time in greater Minnesota. You've got to spend time in the exurbs. You've got to spend time in the suburbs as well. And I think it would produce elected and public officials who really want to best represent their entire community, not just the base of their party. And so it is really incredible the work that Jeanne, you and FairVote have done. As an added bonus, ranked choice voting would prevent spoilers who have really no shot at winning an election from producing an undemocratic result. We saw that all over Minnesota here in many elections in 2020. In fact, it almost happened to me in my race, as you get all kinds of shenanigans and documented evidence that the GOP allegedly paid an opponent from one of the marijuana parties to participate in my election with the express intent of pretending to be progressive and pulling votes away from me. And so, you know, that kind of undemocratic effort, and it's just wrong when you are on so many levels, in addition to illegal to pay a candidate to jump into the race. Another critical set of democratic reforms that I just want to make a couple of mentions about here is H.R. 1, the For the People Act. The U.S. Congress is going to take up H.R. 1 this week. I am incredibly excited. Congressman Penny talked about, you know, big dark money in politics and the idea that post Citizens United, the special interest groups on both sides and all sides have come into these races. And we don't know where the money comes from. We don't know what interests are aligned, what corporate interests might be aligned to keep me from getting reelected. And we don't know whoever's running negative ads against my opponent in a swing district like this, where that money is coming from either, to the extent that we should. So not only would it disclose who's contributing to those super PACs, but it also would protect the right to vote, which we see already is going to be an extreme tactic used in 2022, and one that's been deployed before, you know, for parties who don't have any real ideas. So, you know, it's a comprehensive democratic reform, including expanding automatic voter registration, strengthening alternative voting like vote by mail, and early voting, and addressing partisan gerrymandering, all of the things that are holding back our democracy today and keeping every single American from being heard. I am incredibly excited about H.R. 1 coming back to the House floor this week. I'm offering 2 amendments. We'll see where they go. One of them would ban members of Congress from serving on corporate boards. If you can believe it, members of Congress, it's entirely legal for a member to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives as well as on a corporate board. And the other amendment would ban individual stock ownership. It's a little more controversial, but I believe that members of Congress shouldn't hold individual stocks. Mutual funds are fine, blind trusts are fine, but these individual stocks, we've got to take them out from an ethics perspective, because at the end of the day, we've got to do everything in our power to restore Americans' confidence in our democracy. So Jeanne, I'm really incredibly proud to be here today, and just thank you to so many people I see who are such good friends of democracy.
Well, thank you, Congressman Craig. It's always a pleasure to have you and to have your voice around democracy issues and fighting hard in Congress and really being a voice for Minnesota. We couldn't be more fortunate than to have your leadership. So keep up the great fight in Congress. We're with you, and don't hesitate to let us know how we can always be helpful to continue to push those efforts forward in Congress.
Thank you, Jeanne.
So now, are you going to stick around for Q&A?
I do plan to stick around.
Great. So now we're going to hear 1 to 2 minutes from each of the state legislators who are with us today. And I know some need to leave early, so I'll try to call on people as I know you need to leave early. But I'd like to begin actually with Senator Lindsey Port, who has jumped right into the democracy space, sponsoring the clone bill in the Senate for ranked choice voting. That's 1651, I believe, is the number there, and leading on the big companion to House File 9 in the Senate. So thank you for your leadership, Senator Port, and please share with us your perspective.
Thank you, Jeanne. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you and be here with you today. We've seen this year the pressures that our democracy really is under. They've been laid really bare over this last year. We've seen how quickly disinformation and partisan rhetoric can really not just sow division, but really sow destruction in our system. And it is vital that we actually put the work in. Democracy does not stand on its own. We have to put the work in to strengthen and protect our democracy. And that's why it was really one of the easiest choices to dive in and work on this issue when I was elected to the Senate this year. And I'm really proud to be the chief author, like Jeanne said, of the ranked choice voting clone in the Senate. And I think we are probably going to have another clone if we have time to get it from the revisor, because there's so many people who want to sign on to it. And also, in addition to that, the Democracy for the People Act, like Jeanne was saying. And that act is really, really sort of the state's answer to HR 1 that Congresswoman Craig is working on. It talks about automatic voter registration, ranked choice voting, fair redistricting, campaign finance reform, and restoring the vote for folks who have served their time. And in addition to lots of other pieces of our democracy that need strengthening. And really, our priority has to be about bringing people into the process, making the process of democracy sit in the hands of the people. That's where it should be. It should not be in, corporate money should not be dictating our democracy. The people should be dictating our democracy. And so that's our goal. And it really is, it's a boost to sit here with you on a beautiful afternoon and see all of you who are engaged in this and really focused on this, because in the Senate this year, in addition to having great bills like this, we are also seeing a voter ID bill that is working its way through the process. And we are going to have to be vigilant against those bills that are working to keep people out of the system and keep democracy away from the people. So I'm really pleased to be with you, excited for Q&A. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Senator Port. The Minnesota Senate's a different place from the House for certain. And that's problematic, not just for the measure to reintroduce voter ID, but they've also reintroduced a preemption bill on ranked choice voting to ban it from use in Minnesota. So it continues along its very anti-democratic path. We don't believe that any of these bills will receive a hearing in the Senate, but we're making every effort possible on both bills to pass them through the House and making sure that they're teed up for passage should there be an opportunity in the next biennium to get those passed. And once again, congratulations on your victory last year in the Senate, Senator Port. Your leadership is very welcomed in the Senate. I know that Representative Liz Reyer is here and she needs to leave early. So I'm going to jump to Representative Reyer. Are you here?
I am here. Thank you. I'm sorry I don't have visuals today, but it's great to see all of you. It's great to be here. I have so much appreciation for Jeanne and the FairVote organization for the work you bring and bringing light to our electoral processes and providing such a powerful alternative. I mean, I'm just such a believer in ranked choice voting because the aspect I'd like to comment on is that I think it brings out the better part of people in their participation. It requires, as was noted earlier, candidates to not go to the dirty side and drive voters away. And I think that it also gives us as voters an opportunity to really be reflective and explore what is important to us in a candidate, what we like in different candidates, and make more trade-offs rather than just having to go to the extremes or think about that terrible thing, electability, rather than values, principles, and leadership. So for all those reasons, I'm proud supporter of ranked choice voting, and happy to be here. Sorry I can't stay longer, but thank you for having this event.
Well, thank you for coming and for as little bit of a time as you could be here and for sharing your voice. And thank you for your service on moving democracy forward in the House, Representative Reyer. We're thankful that you're there. So I know that Senator Jim Carlson and Greg Clausen, I believe, are not able to join us after all today. So we'll continue on with members of the House who are here. Representative Robert Bierman, could you share with us your thoughts on democracy issues and ranked choice voting and your leadership in the House on these issues?
Thank you. It's great to be here with all of you. This issue, you know, when I first ran for office in 2018, the things that bothered me about, you know, the political system was the dysfunction of the political system, the negativity, the lack of engagement of people, especially when I went door to door. And so, you know, when I learned more about ranked choice voting, it was one of the first things that I advocated for, because it impacts all of these things, and it impacts the election process, and it impacts the election results. And most importantly, I think, as Congressman Penny mentioned, it impacts how our elected representatives govern from that point forward when they are working in a broader coalition sense. So that's something that I really like about this bill, and I think it's something that, of all the election things we could be doing, I think this kind of builds this the foundation for further improvement in all those areas. And the only other thing I'll say is thank you for all of you who are working on this. And as I've talked more about ranked choice voting myself and learned more about it, you know, I bring it up in small groups. I had a group late yesterday afternoon of 11 people. And when we started the conversation, not too many of them were familiar with it. And by the end of the conversation, almost everybody says, yes, this is something we should do. So it's incumbent upon all of us to be out there talking about it, educating people. It's a new concept for a lot of people, but once they understand it and all the good points, especially when you say, you know, only people who have a majority get elected, I think that's really fundamental to what we're looking for. So thanks everybody for being here.
Great. Thank you, Representative Bierman. I love that story. We should all be talking about ranked choice voting in that way. And it's true what you said. The more people know about ranked choice voting, the more they appreciate and like the idea for what it can do to strengthen our democracy. So continue to be an evangelical voice on the issue, and we'll continue to expand that education. Thank you so much for all of your service. Representative Todd Lippert, are you still in the Zoom room?
I am.
Great.
Yes.
You're next. Could you please
Great.
share with us
So,
your thoughts on democracy?
Sure. So I'm Todd Lippert. I represent the Northfield, Lonsdale, Montgomery area, and am starting my second term. I'm just excited to be here. This is an extremely important conversation, and I'll simply affirm what's been said earlier. Our democracy is under threat, and you know, we're all aware of that, and we need to be focused on reforms every place we possibly can to make sure that we're protecting the integrity of our democracy and trying to strengthen and revitalize the heart of our democracy. And I think ranked choice voting is right at the center of that conversation. And I also have concerns about spoiler candidates, and I'm sure others will talk more about that as well as we go. That had a huge impact on Minnesota this last election. It's completely undemocratic. It's completely unfair, and a reform like ranked choice voting that would eliminate that possibility is really important for us. So it's important now, and important for the strength of our democracy and representation going forward. So this is just a critical conversation. I'm glad to be a part of it and excited to see the movement that's being built around this issue. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. And in fact, on the spoiler dynamic, we have former Representative Brad Tabke here. I'm going to come back to Brad in just a moment and get his perspective as well. It's such a critical issue that's happening to Minnesota right now. Representative Kaela Berg, are you still here? Great, there you are. Welcome.
I am here. Thank you so much. This is kind of funny for me. Tim Penny was the very first political sign I ever remember seeing yard signs as a young child before I knew I would grow up and do this. And then Congresswoman Craig and Senator Port are the two campaigns I threw my whole self into 4 or 5 years ago now, before I ever thought I'd be sitting here and having the honor to serve with them. So a lot of what has already been said, we don't need to repeat. One thing that I think is exciting, especially here in the Minnesota legislature, is you are seeing this time around a bunch of regular people that ran for office. Single moms, working people who live paycheck to paycheck are now sitting in the halls of the legislature. And I think that's exciting because we are reflective of our communities. And I think that's really important. And so when you talk about workers or single parents or other folks that have certain barriers to getting out to vote, we are talking about removing a lot of those barriers in the democracy bill and making it more equitable for all voters to be able to have their voice heard and be able to represent people that they think reflect who they are and their values. And so along with Representative Greenman's big democracy bill, I'm carrying in the House the bill that Carla Bigham is carrying in the Senate, which is a standalone early voting bill, which just sort of opens up how soon, for a longer period of time that we can have in-person early voting. So folks that are battling childcare or work schedules or other barriers, transportation, this opens up the opportunity for them to get in, get their voice heard, and have more voices in the representation. So it's really exciting to be a part of this forum, and thank you so much.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought up that additional early voting bill. That's a really important bill, and thank you for carrying that. And next we have Representative Liz Boldon with us. Are you still here, Representative Boldon?
I am here.
Ah, there you are. Great. Welcome.
Thank you. So I am so glad to be here this afternoon. I'm so glad to see so many faces across the Zoom screen. And again, I agree with so much of what has been said previously. And I should back up. I'm Liz Boldon. I represent District 25B in the Minnesota House, which is Northern Rochester. And so I won't repeat what has been shared, but I am so excited to support ranked choice voting and talk about it as has been shared, talk about it with folks across the district. There is, I think, still conversations to be had for people to fully understand it. And so I'm always so excited when I get somebody who isn't as familiar and is open to learning about it. And I think we just need to continue that. Democracy, as we know, is under threat in Minnesota and across the country. And so I think it's really important for us to be taking steps in many different angles and many different ways to strengthen that democracy. And democracy is a verb, it is an action, and we all have a responsibility to take part and speak up and work to uphold it and strengthen it. And so I'm really excited about the bills we have in the House that are moving forward. And so excited to continue to do that work. Excited for the Q&A and conversation to come.
Great. Thank you so much, Representative Boldon, and for your service to the democracy here in Minnesota. So now is the time to open it up for Q&A, and I'm hoping that all of you are able to stick around for that. We don't have as much time as we thought we would for audience Q&A, but continue to send your questions because we'll respond to those in writing or in follow-up after the meeting. So continue to post them directly to me in chat, and we'll get to as many as we can between now and about 5 to 5. I wanted to start with a question actually to former Representative Brad Tabke. I'm hoping you're still here. And just the whole issue of the spoiler dynamic has come up a few times, and you certainly were in a race where that dynamic was happening. And I'd like you to speak to your experience and what's next for you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeanne. It is great being here. Great seeing a lot of familiar faces and colleagues that I wish that I were working with this year to get good things done. It would have been great to be sitting with everybody, not necessarily via Zoom, but however we get work done for Minnesota. And I firmly believe that I'm not elected because we don't have ranked choice voting in Minnesota this year. We had a what we're going to call a spoiler candidate here in 55A, which is Shakopee. So I got elected in 2018 to represent Shakopee, and then we won by 600 votes. So the first Democrat elected in Shakopee since the 80s. And so we had won then, and we ran a strong COVID safe campaign, and we lost by about 500 some votes. This election in 2020, but we had a legal marijuana now candidate who didn't campaign, didn't do anything, and he got 7% of the vote. And so that was 1,700 votes. And we only would have needed a little more than half of that in order to win in 2020. And we're very confident that that would have been that. And so a lot of media has analyzed what was going on and what happened here. And we're definitely a campaign that lost because of a third party spoiler vote. And it's really frustrating because the guy that we lost to is not good, I'm going to say. That's the nicest way I can put it. And so it's really frustrating having him represent me and my family and my community because he's doing a lot of terrible things and pushing hard on that very far alt-right, just extraordinarily divisive rhetoric and pushing things. So we have, this week we kicked off our campaign in order to be able to hold him accountable and keep things moving. And so we're, thanks. Yeah, we're excited about it. And evidently people are excited about it too, because we've raised a ton of money this week. So that's awesome. And we will use that in order to make sure that we're talking about why democracy is important, why things like ranked choice voting is important. I was glad to support this while I was elected and keep moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's important to say this, the spoiler effect happens on both sides, and any party can create shenanigans out of that process. I think it's fair to say that it was pretty lopsided in the last cycle. And it just is an anti-voter problem. We want a system that is pro-voter and make sure that the will of the majority of voters really prevails. And the spoiler problem really impacts that opportunity for voters. So ranked choice voting, if for nothing else, is good for that, but it's good for so much more. So I appreciate you bringing that problem to a very personal level and sharing your story, former Representative Tabke, and hopefully we'll be able to see that kind of thing come to a quick end here in our democracy. I'd like to now ask a question of Representative Craig, if you're still on the line. We had a question regarding the John Lewis Act in Congress. Can you speak a little bit to that act and where that's at?
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's the bill number is HR 4, and it's the restoration of the Voting Rights Act. Obviously, John Lewis was such a champion of voting rights in our nation, and so we've renamed the Voting Rights Act the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I know it's going to come to the House floor. I don't know exactly the timing. We're going to do HR 1 first. And we'll work on that next week. Part of HR 1 though, is clean and fair elections. And as part of that, we're actually going to build the record necessary to restore the Voting Rights Act. So, HR 4, commits to make sure that the District of Columbia its citizens have voting rights as well. And so we want to make sure that that self-government is there for the district. But, HR 1 is really about three things. It's about clean and fair elections. It's about ending the dominance of big money in our politics. And it's about ensuring that public servants work for the public and not in their own self-interest. And so there are very, very specific pieces of each one of those three buckets that HR 1 will address, but it'll help tee us up to really implement HR 4, which I'm sure will also pass the U.S. House of Representatives in this session as well.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? Is that a fair thing for me to be able to do in this process?
Sure,
Okay.
feel free to do it. And then for others, if you've got questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll keep taking them. Thank you.
Okay, I've been working for, I think fairly to say, about 15 years with Minnesotans on the Disenfranchised and Returning Citizens Act for voting, restoring the vote. And we always hit so many roadblocks in this state. And when you look at it number wise, we have 500,000 people in this state who don't have a right to vote. When you look at that and you look at the city of Mankato, there are 42,000 people in that state. And when you look at our democracy and people voting in Minnesota, how many more people that would give us, if you just look at being very honest, Democrats and Republicans, and out of 500,000 people, how many more of those people would look at what we're going through and understand and look at fair vote, and their votes are taken away from them with the probation? You get out and you can't vote because you're on probation. How many people are on paper, as they call it, for 10 or 15 years for what they've done? They're returning citizens, they're doing everything right, but they can't vote.
Demetria, thank you for your work in this area. This is actually a huge part of HR 1. Under the big bucket of clean and fair elections, I would also say there's a whole section on improving access to democracy, because that's what you're talking about, improving access to democracy. So HR 1 would ensure that individuals who have completed their felony sentences have their full voting rights restored. So the federal government, under federal law, we would address that. I mean, there's lots of pieces of this, Demetria, because we know that there are institutional barriers that have been put in place in certain states that are designed to prevent, especially people of color, from access to democracy. And so part of HR 1 is restoring, once someone has completed their felony sentence, the right to vote. It's taking away some of the barriers that other states have put on these cumbersome voter registration processes. It's making sure that these limited voting hours that have been put in place to depress the vote are eliminated. It's making sure that each area of our country has a minimum number of polling locations, and that these, reducing these long lines. I mean, we know what voter suppression looks like in our nation. And what I think is wonderful about this organization at FairVote is this isn't about, a Democrat or Republican or any other party. This is about making sure that every single one of us have equal access to the ballot box. That's what this is about. And so HR 1 is very strong in this area, Demetria.
Thank you so much. And I know we've got questions about the equivalent to that bill here in Minnesota. So I'm going to remind everybody it's House File 9, carried by Representative Greenman, and it carries many of the provisions that are in HR 1 at the federal level. With respect to the restoration of voting rights once someone is off probation, I know Representative Cedric Frazier is carrying a standalone bill on that issue in the House. I don't know that number. Perhaps someone on the call knows that in the House. And I don't know who's carrying that in the Senate. Senator Port, do you know who's carrying that bill in the Senate?
I don't. I know Senator Bobby Joe Champion has really done a lot of work on this in the past. I think we're pretty aware in the Senate that we wouldn't even get a hearing on it. And so we've really been focused on having the broader conversation and making sure we're playing defense against any additional barriers that might be put in place.
Right.
Yeah, and I spoke at Ms. Greenman's meeting this past week. So like I said, I'm on everybody's doorstep saying, please, please, please. So,
well, thank you for your work in this area, and hopefully we'll make progress over the next couple of years on particularly that bill. I understand that we now have Senator Jim Carlson with us, so welcome, Senator Carlson. We've given all of you a minute or two to just say a few opening remarks about your work and democracy issues and ranked choice voting and how you're leading these issues forward. Senator Carlson.
Oh, thank you, Jeanne. This is really important for many reasons. One of them is that it will counter some of the activities to suppress the vote. One of the things that we need to remember is that the Republicans are going to try to rule by minority. They're not really trying to get the majority. They want the minority, and they will try to do anything they can to win elections, but still have the minority elect them. And what we need to do is make sure that we get our message correct so that actually, for instance, Greater Minnesota realizes what they're up against. And I think what I'm doing right now is I'm looking into what is the problem? What are they trying to solve? I live in Dakota County, asked our auditor last week, give me the list of people who have been charged for a voting irregularity or that somebody that you might think is fraud. And they thought for a second and they said, it may have been 1 or 2 in 2020. They came back with an email a little while later and said, it's 0 in Dakota County, none. So what we need to do, and what I'm really trying to do right now, is get that number from other counties, especially the counties of those people that are on that bill, so that we can say, you know, Senator Newman, how many people are in your county that have been referred to your attorney, your county attorney, to be prosecuted? And if he doesn't know that, I'm hoping that we can get that number ourselves. And this is the kind of thing that we have to look at. They're going to put something in that's going to cost millions of dollars to administer, and it does absolutely nothing. Now, ranked choice voting is the only way that we can get this done quickly, and that is to stop this siphoning of votes. And I will tell anybody that, hey, we've got the Republicans now that are siphoning votes. We have the firm situation of Kanye West being put in by the Republicans to siphon votes. We have the not so firm of the person that ran against Angie as a vote siphoner. And he said in his telephone message that he was offered $15,000. And then we have another person in Apple Valley who was supposedly approached by Senator Gizelka saying that you could get rewarded if you run against Greg Clausen. So we have the 3 levels there that there are suspicions that they have, in fact, intentionally tried to siphon off votes. And I see former Representative Brad Tabke is on here. He knows that very well, that this does work to siphon off votes. And if we had ranked choice voting in place during the 2020 election, those votes would not have been siphoned off. So that's a very important thing for me. The other one, of course, is to get a little bit of civility in the elections. So we need to push this as hard as we can. And I'm hoping everybody talks to their friends and relatives and said, you know, this is an easy thing to do. You don't have to vote for multiple candidates. If you want to just vote for one, do it. But now you can actually vote your heart with your first vote and vote your party with your second, and you'll get the person that you want in office. So thank you for giving me a minute here, Jeanne. I'm sorry I was late on getting logged in, but
no worries. I know there were some problems. Thank you so much for making the effort and being here and for your voice for a pro voter system like ranked choice voting. It's just so key. Before I do want to go into a little bit about the status of some of these bills. We have several questions about what's happening where and what the progress can be here in Minnesota. So I'm just going to remind people we have on ranked choice voting side, it's House File 89. On the Senate, it's 218. Then the other bigger bill that's similar to HR 1 in Congress, it's called House File 9 in Minnesota. And I would say both bills, House File 9 and House File 89, are making progress toward passing in the House this year. Again, very little opportunity is probably going to exist in the Senate. And Senator Carlson is on the Elections Committee in the Senate. Senator Kiffmeyer is not going to hear any of these bills, but it's really important that we create the momentum and get these moved forward out of the House and be teed up for passage in the next biennium. All progress is really important right now. And on the ranked choice voting bill, it has not been heard yet in the House. We are asking everybody to contact your legislator and to contact committee members to make sure that it gets a hearing and continues to move on. And what we're going to do is put information at the end of the meeting on how you can do that and how you can be in touch with us to do that. I wanted to highlight one component of the ranked choice voting bill, and that is to give all communities the opportunity and to break down administrative barriers if they want to use ranked choice voting. We have a council member here, council president actually of the Red Wing City Council, who had long wanted to do ranked choice voting, but is stuck with administrative barriers, statutory requirements around ballot design, and they just can't do it even if they want to. Council member Norton, are you still here to speak to your progress in Red Wing?
Yes, thank you, Jeanne. I'll be really brief since I know you're close to time on here, and you said it very well. We have wanted to have this conversation in our community. We've been working towards that for several years. We were able to move that conversation and start looking at our charter commission policies, but we really got stuck by the Secretary of State's office not being able to have an example ballot with that formatting and that language, which, I mean, we've seen this year how important that formatting and that language and the support of the Secretary of State's, guidance is to our elections. But until we can get past some of that clerical sort of work there, we are stuck. We can't really move the ball any further. As a charter city, we would like to be able to do that, but we have our elections in even years. So we need to, coordinate our ballots with our federal and our state elections. And that right there is our stopping block. We just really can't even have those conversations in our community. So we have a lot of support for us for these bills so that we can keep moving that forward and having those conversations. Thank you, Jeanne.
Oh, well, thank you, Council President Norton. It's really important, the work that you're all doing. And let's just get this bill passed and give communities the freedom you all need to do this, what you need to do for your communities. So thanks for your efforts. I'm going to do one final question, and this is back to Representative Craig, because I think it's on a lot of people's minds, and that is, what's your best guess with what will happen with redistricting, especially in congressional districts 1 and 2?
Oh, Jeanne, that's the $1 million question at this point, right? We know that the data aren't even going to be available for the census until the end of September. Obviously, I think that will cause the legislature to miss some deadlines. And my suspicion is that we'll end up just like we did a decade ago, where a Republican-controlled Senate will put forth something that Governor Walz will reject that will end up in the Minnesota Supreme Court, and then it ends up in some sort of independent commission. The truth is, what that means from a timeline and timing perspective, we've never had the data this late that I'm aware of. So it's going to be super interesting. And what does that mean? If the prognosticators are correct for CD2, taking on another 100,000 constituents, and after losing a congressional seat in the state of Minnesota, my district is going to be just as tough as it ever has been for a Democrat or a Republican to hold. So that's my prediction for CD2. And from a timeline perspective, I think it's going to be very, very late in the cycle until we know exactly who our constituents will be.
Right. Well, thank you. And the same is true in Minnesota, then it follows the same timeline. So we all need to just hold tight and hope for the best on timeline and hold out for the best on retaining all 8 congressional districts, right? So there are a lot of people working on this issue, and we'll make sure in our follow-up email that you're going to get information about who to contact for redistricting, ranked choice voting, and all of the other bills. We have lots of questions about which bills are doing what. We'll make sure that all gets to all of you in an email. Meanwhile, we're going to close out, and in doing that, we have provided links to how you can all volunteer. You've got volunteer links for FairVote Minnesota, volunteer links for Clean Elections Minnesota, how to contact your legislator. That's the most important thing you can do right now. We're in session. It's really the action you all take to make sure your representative and any committees that you care about, especially on ranked choice voting, that they're hearing from you right now, and that you're also contacting not just your state representatives, but your congressional representatives as well. They want to hear from you. I'm sure Representative Craig wants to hear from you as often as you can on matters that issues that matter to you. So keep that pressure on. And then, of course, you know, none of this work happens without resources to make sure that we can organize volunteers like you to create the kind of democracy we want. So there's a contribute link as well here. Please contribute. We are on the final hours of a $100,000 match by the end of February. And it is the end of February. So any dollar you give between now and midnight tonight will be doubled by generous donors. So we appreciate any amount of financial support you can also provide for our efforts. We are very hopeful that we will make progress and pass ranked choice voting statewide out of the House this year, and that we do the same for House File 9 and make progress on all of these very, very important democracy issues. 2021 is the year for democracy reform. January 6th made that abundantly clear to all of us, and it's incumbent on us to keep that pressure on. It won't happen if we don't do that. So we are so grateful that you're all engaged in the Democracy Town Hall tonight. We had questions we couldn't get to, but we've cataloged all of them. We'll make sure we address them in the follow-up email. And Representative Craig, I'll give it to you if you have 30 seconds or a minute you want to say some final remarks.
Just to reinforce that my experience on January 6th was both terrifying from a personal perspective as well as what is in store for our democracy. And we know that those who would seek to depress this democracy, to end it, are active, and they're working hard. And so just to every single one of you, thank you for your support of FairVote Minnesota. Thank you for your support of our democracy.
Thank you, Representative Craig. Well, we want to make sure that that kind of scenario never plays out in the United States again. Again, that's the work of all of us. We have 3 more democracy town halls. You can find them at fairvotemn.org/town hall between now and the end of March, and across the state. CD3 and CD5 are next, and Greater Minnesota is on March 14th. So stay tuned for more. Thank you all for coming. We'll follow up in an email. You'll be hearing from us. And thank you again for doing everything you can to advance our democracy here and across the country. Have a great evening, everybody.